Hello again, everybody.
And welcome back. I'm Liz Fong-Jones.
And I'm Austin Parker.
And I'm Kelly Fitzpatrick.
And you are watching OPS Live, coming to you from sunny San Diego. I was just outside. It's gorgeous. This is a relevant fact because everyone at this table right now is from New York.
And depending upon their melanin content, is sunburned or covered in sunscreen or is neither.
Yeah, I put on the face sunscreen today.
I think I got sunburned just walking around for like 10 minutes yesterday at noon.
Yeah, it was really sunny. It was nice. It was like 80-something.
Yeah, so KellyAnn, have you been attending the Observability Practitioner Summit sessions today?
I have. So I'm an analyst. I work for a company called Redmonk. We're a small boutique analyst firm that really focuses on developer experience. And I actually served on the Observability Practitioner Summit Programming Committee. So I wanted to show up and kind of see how the talks turned out because I was just so excited to hear all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should invite analysts to our program committees more often. That's a thing we haven't really done for things like SRECon.
Yeah. I think you get an interesting sort of slice, right? Because the analysts, like your whole job basically is just to know a lot of things.
Yeah, and it depends too, because so you'll have analysts who focus on little, certain wedges of tech. But at Redmonk, there's 4 analysts, so we all cover such a broad variety of things. So when we're looking at something like observability, we're looking almost across different vendors, but also how does that fit into tech in general.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So you were in there all morning. What would you say your favorite talk was? Not to put you on the spot.
I loved all of them. I feel like I shouldn't be allowed to choose a favorite because I was
true.
on the programming
committee.
But I did. The nice thing is there was something to be excited about, I think, by each talk.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, we had an opening talk, Nina from now Splunk.
Yes.
Formerly of Omnition.
Yep.
Talking about how observability is not just, for back-end development, how it can be used for, kind of front end. We got our first mention of open telemetry.
Right.
Which was, I thought it was really great to kind of start
right
early with
jump.
That as well. So that was, kind of great.
Mm-hmm.
Other things that kind of stuck out. I love when we see folks from academia at tech events. Samania's talk about the leitmotif, the whole workflow kind of motif, I thought was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, we actually had her on here just an hour ago-ish?
Yeah.
So
she said that they're getting ready to open source their thing. I hope it will interoperate with open telemetry.
Yeah.
Kind of, if we're seeing all these things converge, we should be ideally not building separate projects.
Right.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think that academia can definitely do, in addition to, you have foundations and the like, but really kind of this cross organization working together, interoperable, kind of aims.
Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely the kind of thing where if there is not a commonly accepted standard, then academic folks will go and build their own. But if there is a common standard, that means that people can benefit from this research sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really liked about her talk too also was the questions at the end. The first question was a comment, which normally is annoying, but the comment was this was such a great talk. So I think that's okay to bend the ask, instead of asking a question, you make a comment when it's a comment like that. And the second question was, kind of well, when were we going to be able to try this out? So other people are eager to look at what she's working on.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And then after that was
Slack.
Yeah. We had him on. Suman.
So are you getting all the speakers after these speeches?
We're trying to get most of them.
We're trying to get most of them, yeah. We really want to give the folks out there in internet land sort of make them feel like they're here.
And that means getting to talk to all of the speakers, get the 30-second summary of their talk, and then get a chance to ask questions of the speakers.
This is like the hallway track, but live streamed.
But I feel like it's also behind the music. You at home are getting some info from the speakers that we're not getting in the audience.
That's true, yeah.
So I'm kind of jealous. I wish that I could be in 2 places at once.
I feel like a lot of people in there are thinking that because we're the cool kids hanging outside of school wearing leather jackets and smoking. It's legal in California.
Also spoken like someone from upstate New York, I feel like.
Oh, thank you. I'm from Kentucky, if you recall.
Yeah, but you're now in upstate
That's true.
New York.
They've claimed me.
Yeah.
I think there's an irony here that like I believe like 90% of the people at this that we've had here, I feel like, are from New York.
It is kind of a place where a lot of people live.
You know, that's one thing I always like to say about New York. It's a place where a lot of people live.
It's a great state.
It is. I love
Having
it.
moved to other states, I chose to move back to it on purpose. So.
Yeah.
So I have a question for both of you.
Yeah.
Shoot.
So obviously you've been out here, talking to people instead of being in there watching the talks. Are there any specific talks that you're like, oh, I really wish I had seen that?
I think definitely the motif talk was the one that I wanted to see, because everything else you can kind of like, I've seen most of these talks before, so I can predict what they were going to say, but that one was one that I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, I think that's the one I'm going to go back and watch on YouTube.
On the replay. Anything for this afternoon where you're...
That's a good question.
see.
Let's pull up the schedule for
Pull
the
up the
afternoon on
schedule.
top of the stream
Yeah, let me
and
just
make sure our
replace
viewers
myself.
can see it. Yeah.
While you're doing that, I will say that I'm, again, excited to see all the talks.
Yes.
I feel like I can't pick, but
Yeah,
again,
you can't
there's-
play
can- there-
favorites too much.
right.
but there is another talk like, kind of coming from academia, so we have another grad student this time.
Pythia, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Which was something I think that was covered in last year's summit.
I believe so. There were two. There was Pythia and there was a logging or nanolog, I think, was the other like big academic talk from last year, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. If anyone's watching this and wants to like kill 45 minutes, go look through last year's talks on YouTube, and I believe it was called nanolog, but it was a really cool like binary logging framework. So yeah, just to recap what we got coming up this afternoon, we're starting off with this is too small. I can't read it.
I can't read that either.
Yeah.
We are starting off with A Picture is Worth 1,000 Traces, which
Yep.
is Steve Lenders of Splunk and Yuri from Uber, one
Yeah.
of the authors of the esteemed Jaeger.
Yes. Also, he has a book out now. Do you see that?
Yeah, there's so many books coming out. It's
There's a-
ridiculous.
I know.
Like,
There's a
lot of books
I don't know how
coming
you managed to
out.
stay on top of it, KellyAnn.
Well, one of the things I found is that reading is a really great way to procrastinate when you have to write something.
Oh.
Yeah. So when you're like, oh, I could do my writing, whatever it happens to be, or I could go read these wonderful books that have kind of come out.
I think.
Yeah. So it is. I think as an analyst, you get to kind of carve out some reading time as part of your job, which is fantastic.
Do you want to go? Do you want to say hi? Do you want to wave to the internet?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Say hi.
Hey, it's Bogdan, everybody.
This is Bogdan, formerly one of the founders of Open Census and now one of the Open Telemetry core contributors.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's this about?
It's Observability Summit Live.
Oh,
So
nice.
we're streaming on Twitch.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Hey everyone. See you tomorrow and today.
Yeah, you'll be able to catch Bogdan in several different talks this week at KubeCon. Some of which will be live, I think.
The keynotes will be live streamed.
Keynotes will be live
The
streamed.
individual sessions are not, unfortunately, I think.
Yeah, I think Bogdan. Is Bogdan and you? No, it's you and someone else on the
Sarah.
keynote. Sarah. Oh, right, Sarah. Okay. You can see our OPS Live's very own Liz Fong-Jones at the keynote tomorrow.
Which I do need to practice for at some
So
point.
you're speaking tomorrow at the keynote. in the
That's
morning.
correct. I'm evening keynote.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Yeah. No.
So I feel like this is a long day of streaming out to everyone to keep them up to date on what's happening here.
Yeah, it also is an opportunity to work a little bit on my presentation.
Yeah.
I kind of get to, rehearse bits of the demo for 12 people instead of 10,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we did some live coding, and we've done some pull requests. So it's really, we do like every week like a 30-minute sort of thing called Open Telemetry Tuesdays. That it's usually like Liz and Isabel, my colleague, but sometimes I'm on there. And this is just sort of like a giant-sized one of those.
Yeah, so sometimes there is collaborative coding, sometimes there's just talking about what we see is going on over the past week, and sometimes it's talking about, hey, here's the new directions that we're heading.
Yeah.
So KellyAnn, do you think that Open Telemetry has legs? Hey, where are we in the adoption curve?
I mean, I certainly hope so. We're still early, right? It's still something that people are waiting for it to
Yep, it's true. We have zero production users. We don't think people should use it in production right now, right? Like it's very alpha.
Well, one of the comments that one of the speakers had, or a question was like, oh, when will this be ready? And someone said it wasn't, and someone was like, oh, but it could be. So I feel like the people working on it are very confident in it, and I think that's always a good sign.
I feel like I don't think you can really plot like a straight linear curve here or any kind of curve, right? Because it really is the product of the projects that have come before, right? Like Open Census, and Open Tracing were both very mature sort of APIs and frameworks, and like bringing those together, like the end product is very informed just sort of by these years.
It is a second system, right, which has advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
But definitely someone asked me a while, I think someone asked on the OpenTelemetry Gitter, why did you decide to throw out the code and rewrite it?
Yeah.
I think they know that is an important question that we do need a satisfying answer to, and mine has been basically like, in order to make sure that the projects actually came together, rather than one feeling like they were the redheaded stepchild, right? You kind of had to not pick favorites among one or the other, instead pick the best parts of both.
Yeah, and I think it's different from SIG to SIG. Like .NET largely started from where Census was, but in a large way that's because it was very different than the existing, like, it was kind of very different from the existing Census libraries, I guess I would say. It was Microsoft-y in a way that we knew we were going to keep doing, and so I think that's one thing I've been, as an Open Tracing maintainer, like I'm very excited that Open Telemetry is, for the most part, saying like, hey, these should all look and feel like native projects, right? Like, other than sort of the broad scopes of the API, you should make sure that everything using this feels like comfortable. So if you're a JavaScript user, you should feel like it's a JavaScript API. And if you're a Java user, it should feel like a Java API. And if you're a Go user, it should feel very Go-y.
Go-y? Is that the...
That's the official new thing.
Like
you heard it here first. Would it be GUI?
I like Go-y.
Go-y.
I like it.
Go free?
Go free, yeah.
I don't know.
But back to your point about how it really needed to be something that wasn't like, it's really this one with a little bit of this thrown in.
Yeah.
That does take time, and it does take work, and you can't just kind of like snap your fingers and pronounce it as such and have it as such. But no, I think that the more you see this as kind of like a real kind of merging or like marriage of these two projects in a very productive way, the better.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So what are you hoping to see us do over the next 6 months in the observability space, kind of to mine your brain a little bit as an analyst?
Oh my goodness. So observability for me is so interesting because I worked in industry, and I actually worked with Austin at a company called Prenda, and then I actually left a couple years ago to go into academia. Like I took a postdoc at Georgia Tech. And in that space, I kind of came back and suddenly, like, to my mind, observability had sprouted up as a thing that you could not ignore, whereas before it had not even been on my radar. So, like, having that as almost like a term that has currency in ways that it did not before, almost to the point where one of the talks that we had today, actually, I think it was at James Byrne.
Yeah.
He actually had a slide where he's like, I'm going to throw in all of these buzzwords. You have like observability, exclamation point, APIs, and the like. So it has become something a term that people are using in spaces where I don't even know if it actually is observability that they're really doing, but it's so amorphous in terms of what we mean when we say observability in some ways. So I don't know that I want to see that close down. I think that the more that space is opening up possibilities, the kind of better.
Opening up possibilities, but at the same time, right? Like people need to have a way of getting started. I imagine.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the clearer you can make pathways into understanding what observability is and how different technologies are offering you something that is useful and productive, I think the better. If that makes any sense. So give people a path in there, but at the same time acknowledge that they're not all coming from the space that you might think that they are.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like definitely when we were doing workshops around Open Telemetry, Austin and I talked about this morning, right? Like there were, half people who were brand new to tracing or any kind of working with observability technology, and half were already people who knew distributed tracing and were looking at the latest.
Yeah, the latest sort of like thing. I remember got into observability, like through my job, obviously. But I remember like the initial, like I hadn't even heard of a lot of this stuff, right? But the problems that I had seen, the sort of my experience at Apprenda in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and a lot of undiagnosable errors, and spending my evenings RDPing into 30 different Windows VMs to manually piece together requests to figure out.
You miss the VMs and the RDPing, don't you?
No, not at all.
Yeah, me neither.
It was very toilsome.
It was very toilsome, but that was like when someone came and told me about like distributed tracing, right? Like it's like, oh, where has this been all my life?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think is fascinating is the problems that observability is supposed to help diagnose and mitigate, right, and address. Those are problems that so many people have, and they are not all necessarily aware that there are these different options to help.
Right, exactly. And, contrary to what I'm going to say in my talk tomorrow, which is, necessarily because this is a CNCF conference, I don't actually think that observability is only for cloud native systems, right? It's essential for cloud native systems. It turns out that even if you have a boring monolith, you still
need observability. I would say it's essential for running modern software, right? Like, even if you have a monolith, like, I have a blog post on this I've been working on for a while, which is, I call it, your system is deeper than you think, right? So even if you're in a monolith, people aren't building software, you're not building and running software the same way anymore. You have countless dependencies on either, third-party package, either packages that you're importing, or on your abstraction over hardware, so Kubernetes or whatever, Docker or whatever. Your CI/CD is adding into this.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
There's all this hidden complexity, and a lot of times I think traditionally, sometimes engineers developers can ignore it because it's so abstract to them because it's someone else's responsibility, but they're still effectively responsible for those, for the CI. They're still technically responsible for the CD. They're still technically responsible for we did something, and it broke.
Something has broken.
Something has broken, and I don't know what, and I don't know why, and I'm pretty sure it's not my code, but I can't prove that it's not my code because I don't have observability, right? And so I think that's sort of the look for it in the future on probably lightstep.com/blog. But yeah,
unless you choose to contribute to the open telemetry medium.
Maybe. I think that's the hard part about this is figuring out where to run certain things.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier to Benjamin from the New Stack where he was, right? Like there are so many different places that you can reach different audiences, and you often wind up having to repeat the same messages over and over until we finally stick.
Yes. And that's one thing. So as analysts, we talk to a lot of different companies, and we get sometimes we get the half hour, here's what we do. Yeah. And what I often find is that folks they're afraid to repeat things, because they don't want to almost offend someone and assuming that they don't know something, right? Or say something too many times, whereas repetition and saying things again and again it's not always bad, because there are audiences that don't know the things that your other audiences know.
Well, yeah.
Speaking of that, I'm seeing we have some questions on the live stream, both about the practice of observability outside of computer science, which I thoroughly agree with. Someone is commenting that they used to be a nuclear reactor operator and they depended upon observability to understand what was happening inside of the reactor. So that's kind of going back to the system's theoretical definition of observability.
Yeah.
And controllability.
Yeah. Yep. And then we have another person asking what OpenTelemetry is. And OpenTelemetry, in one sentence, is a way to instrument your applications in a vendor-neutral manner so that you can understand what's happening inside of them, whether it be using logs, structured logging, or metrics, or tracing, all in one library.
Yeah. And for anyone that's just joining us, you are watching OPS Live from San Diego, California.
And OPS stands for the Observability Practitioners Summit.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is only the second one, I think?
This is the second one.
Yeah, this is year 2.
Yep, I'm Austin Parker, Liz Fong-Jones, and
KellyAnn Fitzpatrick.
That was synced up really well.
That was actually great. I was getting it in stereo.
Yeah.
I think it was fantastic.
I feel like that wasn't a bit. We didn't plan that.
So yeah, we're kind of talking about some of the broader landscape of what's going on in the world of cloud-native systems, what's going on with observability, and kind of where are we actually landing in terms of people actually using this stuff and agreeing on what all of this means.
Yeah. So I have questions for you too.
Sure.
Do you? Yeah.
I
We'd
mean,
love to
I'm
answer.
happy to take questions, so I always have questions. So we talked a little bit about people entering the observability space, and like Austin and I talked a little bit about our own kind of paths, so like learning about it. But what would you recommend to folks who are maybe even just starting out in software development, right? Because the number of software developers we have is growing, right? It's increasing. There's always that projection of what happens when we reach 100 million devs and how do we get there. And my colleague, James Governor, has talked about this as well. But so as folks are kind of onboarding to not only software development, what should they know about observability? When is it something that they should worry about? Because like, as you said, developers are often responsible for all of these different things that they don't necessarily think about or touch day to day when they're trying to just get their code out.
Yeah.
I think that when we talk about the idea of shifting concepts left, right? We talk about shifting operations left. We talk about shifting testing left. At least the testing bit is well accepted.
And documentation left.
Right. I think that when we talk about shifting observability left, I think the first place people should think about observability is just in terms of, every programmer has added printf debug statements, right? Every single one. Right. All of us do it, right? And I think that that's the first place where you need to think about, hey, am I doing this in a more or less observable way, right? Like, am I doing this in a way that makes sense only to me? Will it make sense to me 10 years from now? Like, printf got here, right?
Yeah.
I think that when you start thinking about observability as a spectrum and not a thing of either you have it or you don't, right, then you can start adopting practices that are more friendly to achieving observability, right? Things like, hey, like, let's use structured logging, right? Like, let's actually structure our logs in a way that's understandable both to computers and humans, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the itty-bitty steps that you can make even as a baby programmer, right?
Yeah.
I love the way you put that though. Like, it's not something you have or you don't have. Like, it's not something that someone who's running a company be like, go out and get me some observability, and like you just go and buy it. And
that always ends well, buying a DevOps or
but
buying an
exactly
we'll buy some DevOps. We'll buy some digital transformationists. That we hear a lot.
We'll buy some cloud. We'll buy some cloud native. I mean,
I imagine you must be sick of getting asked, hey, like, I'd like to spend $100 million on a DevOps.
And we don't get those questions that much, but the terms that we do hear kind of again and again, especially when folks are trying to figure out how to appeal to people who are looking for something like DevOps, but how do you translate that into explaining what you do and matching them up with things that could actually help the organization, I think, is the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I would even, to kind of go back to your question, like, where do you start? Like, I think this is one of the real problems, right, in how we train people to be software developers, because the entire, the traditional, at least educational model of like, oh, you go learn about computer science, and that teaches you how to become a programmer, well, no, it teaches you how to become a computer scientist, which is quite often a useful prerequisite to becoming a programmer. But things like logging and metrics and like software, the craft of software.
Right, exactly. On the flip side, we have ops people, right, who are from a traditionally ops background, who are being thrown into this DevOps world with this, not necessarily with this empowerment to actually change their software rather than treating it as a black box, right?
Right, and
that leads us
they
to,
are the ones that have that expertise, right? They've flexed that muscle of like having to monitor software.
Right. Yeah, they know what works and doesn't work well, or at least what they would like to change, right? And it's just a matter of how do we connect those folks into ownership of observability as well.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the big challenges right now is that there's almost a weird chauvinism coming from like, I think some of this is just like, it's a crowded space, vendors are vendors, marketing is marketing, right? And everyone wants to feel like they're standing out. But there is almost like this chauvinistic approach of like, hey, all that stuff you've been doing, throw that on the floor.
You've been doing it wrong.
Or alternatively, right, like, you've been doing it mostly right except for this one weird trick that you can apply using our software, right?
And that's all the ads on your browser, like this one weird trick for A, B, C, and D. Like,
We observability 10 things, the 9th will shock you.
I might read that though. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
You might read it to make fun of it though.
I would just to see. Like, what made this list?
I feel like we need. Okay, total tangent. I really, I feel like we need to adopt like the listification thing. I think that's actually a really good strategy for people because I think people will read them, right? Like the reason we do all this is
you have to do it in a self-aware manner.
Yeah,
right?
it has to be self-aware,
Yeah.
but I think people will click. People will read that stuff. So much of it is, if you try to like parse through, like that's the other problem. So we make all this like kind of inaccessible because we're not teaching these basic concepts, right? Most people don't start at first principles. They don't talk about observability in a way that's like, hey, this is some, you have outputs from your system and you want to control the system using those recorded outputs, right? We talk about it.
There's a person named Abby Fuller who recently did a workshop on kind of how you build a more observable system step by step, which I thought was really, really amazing. And hopefully she gets accepted to present it at SRECon America's West.
That would be great, yeah. I think it's stuff like that. It's really changing. So as senior people, it's changing how we think about systems and changing how we think about building our systems and prioritizing sort of observability practices as not a like, oh, we just throw some stuff into some dashboards and we're good, but as like we're actually bringing this into the development life cycle, right?
And this is why I think that the overlap with the testing space is so important, right? Where people are already inclined to think about testing, right? I think that that's the natural opportunity to say, this is kind of testing, but in prod, right?
Yeah.
To reuse a axiom that I've been reciting all day.
Yeah, but I think also, this is how you get people. You're like, okay, so you hate writing tests. Awesome. I've got something for you that's better than tests.
Yeah, what was your second question?
Oh my goodness, that was like 5 or 10 minutes ago.
We can pick a new second question.
I feel like that was a really good first question, though.
That was a really good first question. You just want to go out on top?
Yeah, I think I do. I'm just going to go out with that question. But thank you. It was so great talking to both of you today.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, I'm going to go check out some more of the talks.
Yes, and we will be right back after a short break to reset up some stuff with probably a little bit more
live coding.
Live
Maybe
coding.
I'm going to rehearse my demo for tomorrow. That's what I'm going to do.
And and then also here in about half an hour we'll have Josh McDonald from Lightstep talking about Telemetry, assuming we can get the audio to work. So stay tuned for that. We'll be back in just a few moments.